world overrun by a zombie outbreak, a man named Rourke wandered the desolate wastelands. Hardened by the loss of his wife to the zombies, he had developed a deep hatred for them and chose to hunt them down one by one. One day, after killing a zombie, Rourke spotted a woman sitting alone in the middle of the road. His instincts immediately told him it was most likely a trap. Moments later, a few survivors driving by noticed the woman too. Though hesitant, they stopped their car and one of them stepped out to help her. But the moment he approached, he was shot dead on the spot. As Rourke suspected, it was an ambush and a brutal firefight broke out between the survivors and a group of hostile scavengers. The outnumbered group of survivors was quickly wiped out, leaving only one woman alive. The attackers had originally come for supplies, but when they saw the lone woman, their intentions turned darker. Just as they were about to assault her, Rourke intervened, took out a few of the thugs with his rifle and took cover behind a nearby car. Despite being outnumbered, he used the car as cover and took out every last thug. Before leaving, he ensured none would get back up, putting an extra bullet in each of them. The woman he rescued, Sam, pleaded with Rourke to take her and the other survivor back to her camp since their vehicle had been damaged in the fight, and nightfall was approaching, a time when zombies became most active. Rourke initially was reluctant, but when Sam offered valuable supplies in return, Rourke agreed to take her back to her camp. They set out immediately, but despite their best efforts, they couldn't make it to the camp before nightfall, and a growing horde of zombies began closing in behind them. Sam used her walkie-talkie to contact the camp and asked for the gate to be opened. Dugan, one of the defenders inside, responded right away. While the elderly and sick were moved to safety, others armed themselves and prepared for a confrontation. As the gate creaked open, Rourke and the others arrived just in time, pursued by a wave of zombies. Rourke leapt out and began firing, holding the horde at bay as he retreated. Just then, the camp's defenders arrived, unleashing a wall of gunfire that cut down the horde, allowing Rourke and the others to get inside. But just before the doors closed, Rourke noticed a giant, unusual-looking zombie. Although the group was rescued, tensions rose when the survivors discovered Sam's entire team had been wiped out and suspicion fell on Rourke, the unfamiliar outsider. But the tension snapped when Sam showed them a photo of an airplane she had taken. The camp had long dreamed of escaping the zombie-infested city, and this plane gave them hope. Their leader, Frank, immediately announced that if the night passed without further incident, they would head for the plane at dawn. However, despite Sam's testimony, Frank remained distrustful of Rourke. He confiscated Rourke's weapons and ordered him into solitary confinement for safety. Rourke hadn't come to make trouble. He'd only wanted to trade supplies, but he had no choice but to comply. Before being locked up, Rourke asked about the giant zombie he had seen. Dugan explained it was unlike the others. It seemed to possess intelligence and leadership abilities, organizing the mindless zombies into coordinated attacks. They called it the Zombie King, who led the hordes at night, and during the day, it would retreat with them to an abandoned hotel nearby. Not long after, Dugan noticed the camera at the main gate had suddenly gone dark. The guard at the gate heard odd noises outside, and as he went to investigate, a zombie crept up behind and killed him. The gate was breached and the zombies flooded into the camp. The first to be attacked was the guard watching over Rourke. He tried to fight back but missed his shot and collapsed just outside the cell. Fortunately, the gunfire alerted the camp. Once the zombies moved on, Rourke grabbed a lock-picking tool he had hidden earlier and escaped from the cell. Elsewhere, defenseless civilians, elderly, women, and children were herded into a holding room for safety, but the last man trying to enter was ripped apart. Two survivors tried to close the gate, but a zombie pushed against it with unrelenting force. Just as they began to lose ground, Rourke showed up, thinning the horde until the other armed survivors joined him and took down all remaining zombies. At the break of dawn, the survivors prepared to head toward the plane's location, just as they had planned. But when Dugan tried to open the exit door, it wouldn't budge. It felt as though something massive was blocking it from the outside. To figure out what was going on, they circled around to the main entrance and found dozens of wrecked vehicles stacked into a massive blockade, completely obstructing the basement door from the outside. Clearly, the Zombie King was behind it, trying to confine them inside the camp and strike again once night fell. With the only viable exit sealed shut, they debated their next move. Someone suggested they try to move the wrecked vehicles, but they knew they wouldn't be able to clear that many cars before night returned. Another one proposed looking for other vehicles outside the camp, but after 2.5 years of the zombie outbreak, most cars were either broken down or stripped beyond use. Just when it seemed like there were no good options, Rourke proposed that instead of waiting for another attack, they could strike first. They could go to the hotel where the Zombie King was believed to be hiding and take him down. Without their leader, the rest of the zombies would become far less dangerous. It was a high-risk plan, but the only one that offered any real chance of escape, and after thinking it over, Frank agreed to go ahead with it. To cover all possibilities, they decided to split into 2 teams. Frank would lead a group to scout for usable vehicles, while Rourke would take a 5-person team to infiltrate and destroy the Zombie King's stronghold. The strike team made it to the hotel and moved carefully through the shadows, eventually finding the Zombie King asleep in the basement. But there was a problem. The basement had 2 exits, and to successfully eliminate the king, they'd need to plant explosives at both. The second entrance was deep within the Horde, and getting there was nearly suicidal. Drew, who was usually quiet and fearful, stepped forward and volunteered to do the mission. He moved cautiously through the basement, surrounded by sleeping zombies, and carried the bomb in his hands. Just as he was about to place it, the Zombie King suddenly sprang to life and attacked him from behind. Its roar echoed through the basement, instantly waking the entire Horde. With the mission compromised, the team opened fire to cover their retreat. Dugan stayed behind long enough to activate the explosives at his position, providing cover for the others. As the remaining 3 reached the kitchen, they realized Chris had been separated during the chaos. Before they could go back for him, zombies broke through the kitchen door. One teammate made the ultimate sacrifice, holding the line while Rourke and Dugan escaped. He was quickly overwhelmed, but not before pulling the pin on a grenade and taking out a number of zombies. Rourke and Dugan had barely made it out of the kitchen when they ran into another wave of zombies. Forced to retreat up the stairs, they fought off attackers as they moved, barely managing to reach the rooftop and escape into the open air. The zombies finally stopped chasing them when they emerged into daylight. Dugan used his walkie-talkie to contact Chris and realized he had been bitten. Since Chris had a rope they needed to escape from the rooftop, they had no choice but to go back for him. Rourke lured the zombies away, giving Dugan time to find Chris. He discovered Chris unconscious, but just as he took the rope, Chris began transforming and the noise attracted the Zombie King once again. Rourke raced back to help, while Dugan, faced with no other option, had to kill his friend before the transformation was complete. As soon as he did, a zombie tackled Dugan. The 2 wrestled violently, but Rourke arrived just in time, killing the zombie and pulling Dugan to safety. The 2 finally escaped the hotel, but Dugan had been scratched during the fight. As night drew near, Rourke stood beside him, and when the time came, he did what needed to be done and ended Dugan's suffering. Rourke then used the rope to climb down to the ground, but by the time he reached the bottom, the sun had disappeared and the zombies began pouring out into the night. Meanwhile, Frank's team had managed to find a bus that could carry them all. Relief washed over the group until they saw Rourke running toward them, pursued by a massive horde of zombies. The defenders opened fire, desperately trying to thin the wave, but the growing darkness and overwhelming numbers left them no choice but to fall back. They retreated once more back to the camp and slammed the doors shut behind them. The Horde, led by the Zombie King himself, stormed after them. The survivors rushed upstairs and barricaded the doors, temporarily halting the zombies' advance. They had a moment of safety, but the fear of what the night would bring hung heavily over everyone. They quickly gathered and made a new plan. They would stand their ground, defend the main gate, and fight the zombies until the first light of dawn. If they could make it through one more night, survival might still be possible. Before the final confrontation, Rourke confided in Sam, revealing the real reason he had come to the city: to avenge his wife, who had been murdered by the Zombie King. Upon hearing this, Sam offered to fight alongside him, but Rourke declined and insisted that Sam had to protect other survivors. Rourke left alone and headed to the gate just as the Horde began to break through. He opened fire immediately, determined to hold them back, but every time he cleared one group of zombies, another wave surged forward. He threw a grenade to slow them down and quickly moved upstairs. The remaining defenders took down the zombies that pursued him, but the relentless undead kept advancing. Though they were physically drained, they kept fighting, using every ounce of strength to buy time for the vulnerable to escape. By dawn, most of the fighters had fallen, and though the zombie numbers had decreased, the group was all but decimated. Frank emptied his weapon into the oncoming horde before he was finally overwhelmed by a group led by the Zombie King himself. The Zombie King stepped out of the shadows and ordered the remaining zombies to chase down Rourke. As Rourke fled, he shot 2 zombies down, and when the final zombie lunged at him, he dodged and used the cell door to smash it down. But the moment he tried to catch his breath, the zombie king was already behind him. It hurled Rourke several meters, causing him to lose his weapon. Knowing he stood no chance in a direct confrontation, Rourke tried to retreat, hoping to gain an advantage elsewhere. However, the zombie king quickly caught up and pinned him down. Realizing the physical strength alone wouldn't win this fight, Rourke noticed the door to the rooftop and formed a new plan. He raced up the stairs, baiting the zombie king to follow him. Though the monster was intelligent, it didn't realize they were stepping into daylight. As it neared him, Rourke threw open the rooftop door. The zombie king, exposed to the sunlight, instantly began to weaken, and within seconds it was burned into ashes. With his wife's death finally avenged, Rourke had completed his mission. But instead of reuniting with the group and boarding the plane to safety, he chose to continue his journey alone. There were still zombies out there, and Rourke had made it his purpose to hunt them down one by one.